Hi, my name is Charles from Taito Robotics. Today I'm going to be talking about the two main ways that you can power your test when testing motors and propellers in the laboratory. The first, most obvious way is probably to use batteries. It's going to give you a power supply that's as close as possible to what you have in flight, but there are a few disadvantages with using batteries. The first one is that the voltage is not constant, and that can make comparing tests between each other a bit more difficult. The second part is that lithium polymer batteries, especially large ones, have a tendency to catch fire, so that gives some additional safety concerns. What we do in-house here to prevent that is that we use a metal safety box. You can also see inside here that we have a fuse that's rated for the battery that we're using. And another thing we do is that we have an external switch that we can use to turn off power if there were a problem and we can't put our hands in there to disconnect the battery. The final part is to use a proper fire retardant like this one. This one is not rated for those batteries, but we have a bigger one at the back that has the proper rating for lithium polymer batteries. The second way that testing can be done is to use power supplies. The advantage of power supplies is that you can use them for very long tests, and the voltage is also going to be very constant between the different tests that you're doing. There are a few issues with power supply. The first one being that most of them are not designed for inductive loads, such as motors. The problem is especially when motors will break quickly, they produce a high voltage spike that can be sometimes double the voltage provided by the power supply. And that has a tendency to damage them, especially power supplies that are used for powering computers, for example, or powering LEDs. So here we use the commercial one. This one is an Instec that's wired in parallel, and we added extra protection on it with diodes and capacitors to try to protect it. The other way is also, because we saw we had a few issues with power supplies, we decided to contact a company called MCB Electronics, and we worked with them to design custom power supplies for transient loads, such as motors. This one has the proper protection, has an input of 25 kilowatt, and it outputs 200 amps and 100 volts. The last thing to consider when using power supply is how they're going to be connected to the grid. That can be an issue in many labs, especially if the required power is three-phase. Three-phase can be a little bit more complicated to wire or typically more expensive. The alternative is to use, the alternative in North America is to use split-phase AC. So for example, this one is wired on a 125 amp split-phase breaker on a regular commercial panel, which made the installation much easier and much cheaper because it's available in most buildings. So that summarizes how you can test your motors and propellers for drones. Thanks for watching, and don't hesitate to comment below if you have any questions.